तो थोड़ा सा ओवरव्यू लेते हैं आज .NET का. So what is .NET? So mix of .NET. So what is mix of .NET? Why mix of .NET? What we can do with the mix of .NET? Frameworks in a mix of .NET. Introduction to .NET Core. Why .NET Core? CLI commands, and we'll create one console application using .NET Core and CLI commands. Now what is mix of .NET? So mix of .NET is open source platform for building desktop, web, and mobile application that can run natively on multiple operating systems. So .NET is now an open source platform, and it's a general purpose platform using which you can develop the desktop, web, mobile application that can run natively on multiple operating systems. Then the .NET system includes tools, libraries, and languages that support modern, scalable, high-performance software development to that. Now, an active developer community maintains and supports the .NET platform. So it's community-based, it's modern, and it has many tools, libraries, languages, utilities, IDEs, and version control systems, which will help you to develop modern applications, highly scalable applications, and its performance is very high. Now, why mix of .NET? So cross-platform. So now the latest version that we have with the .NET is cross-platform, multi-language platform. So it supports multiple programming languages, one consistent API and library. So you have one API and one library that can be used across multiple types of languages. Multiple types of applications. Open source and productive, extensive tooling, any app, any platform, trusted in performance, object-oriented and service-oriented app. So .NET is a cross-platform. So the current version of a .NET works on Windows, Linux, and Mac. It covers three, we can say, platform. So that's a major application development platform. It supports multiple programming languages of that. So you can use the C Sharp, Visual Basic, or F Sharp. So three languages are available in the current version. So you can use any of that. Now, one consistent API in the library. So it has one consistent API and the library option there. So what it means? It means, for example, we have a link, or we can say EF code. So once you learn the link, you can use that anywhere. So you can use it in a desktop application, or you can use it in a web application, mobile application, microservices application, or any type of application. That. So one consistent API and library feature available, open source and productive. So .NET Core onwards, so .NET is open source platform, and it has extensive tooling, and we can say modern programming support like parallel programming, async programming, due to which the productivity of the developer is going to increase. So you can develop any app, any platform. So right now you can develop any type of app. You can develop the desktop app, mobile app, web app. You can develop the games. You can develop the IoT applications. You can develop the microservices applications. You can develop the APIs, libraries. So many types of apps you can develop using .NET. And any platform means it works on the Linux, Windows, and Mac. So three platform with any processor architecture. Now, trusted in performance. So .NET Core is very fast as compared to other, we can say, frameworks or platforms are there, and performance is tremendous. Now, object-oriented, service-oriented, we can say. Now, if you want to look at to the performance here, suppose if I go to Google Chrome here, and we'll say suppose search for mix of .NET. So if I go to the .NET website here, so if you look at here for the performance, So here we have. Now, if you go to the performance, so faster response time, less compute power, better application. That the .NET punchline we can say. And if you look at here, so 14 responses per second, request and response you can compare. So Node.js can generate, we can say, 172.5K, we can say responses per second with that. That's the second fastest technology that we have. And ACE.NET Core generates 609.9K 14 responses per second with that. And the third position is we have the Go, so Golang, and it generates 110.5K, we can say responses per second. So the performance is tremendous. It's very fast as compared to other frameworks or platforms now. Now, trusted. So Microsoft is very serious about the security. Microsoft always release the patches and updates as per the security requirement of your platform, or we can say framework with that. Now it supports object-oriented, service-oriented microservices architecture. So it supports many kind of different types of programming styles and the architecture style to develop the applications of that. Now, what we can do with the .NET, so currently with the .NET, we can develop the web application for that runs on the Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, or you can also run it on the Docker. Now you can develop the desktop applications, so create native apps for Windows and the Mac OS, or build apps that run anywhere with web technology with that. Now we can also develop the mobile applications, so use a single code base to build native mobile apps for iOS and Android and more. Now you can also develop the microservices, so you can create a microservices based application using Docker containers or Kubernetes with that. Now you can develop the cloud applications, you can create the cloud services, and you can consume all the cloud services, including app services or logic apps, or we can say containers, so we can Azure SQL. So what are the services that we have in the cloud, whether it is the Azure, so 100% Azure services are supported in .NET, and many of the services from AWS also supported in .NET to that. Now, machine learning, so it has support for the machine learning also. You can implement vision algorithm, speech processing algorithm, predictive models, and more to your app. So game development, so you have 2D and 3D games for the most popular desktop phones and the consoles of that. So you can also do the game development. Internet of Things, so make IoT apps with native support for the Raspberry Pi and other single board computers of that. So you can develop the IoT application, games, machine learning and AI apps, cloud services, desktop microservices, mobile app, web app. So using .NET, you can develop many type of applications. So any we can say any type of application. Now, if you look at to the history of the .NET, so .NET was having frameworks like .NET Framework initially, then Mono .NET, then we got the .NET Core, and then we got the Xamarin .NET. Now, if you look at the .NET framework, so it's the first framework released with the .NET. It's a general purpose framework. It's released in 2002. So object-oriented, service-oriented, multi-language platform, single language command, common language runtime, and many more. So it was having many features. .NET framework was very popular, and right now, so many companies use the .NET framework to develop the applications. It's a general purpose framework. So when we say general purpose, you can develop the desktop, web, mobile, APIs, libraries, microservices, application, games, so many types of applications using it. It's object-oriented, service-oriented, multi-language platform. The .NET framework support many languages, including C Sharp, Visual Basic, F Sharp, so R, Python, Simula, Visual C++, Smalltalk. So many languages are there in .NET framework. Now, single language command, so you need to learn only one language, common language and time is also available here. Now, .NET framework was having few limitations. So first limitation was closed source. So it's a closed source, so we can say framework works only on Windows platform. So it works only on Windows platform. Need Visual Studio for execution and running. So it needs the Visual Studio to execute and run the .NET. Now, processor and OS architecture dependent. The performance of the .NET framework depends on the your processor architecture and operating system architecture of that. So works only on Windows platform. Need Visual Studio and closed source of that. Now, to overcome these limitations, Microsoft had sponsored one project called the Mono.NET, And Mono is a software platform designed to allow the developer to easily create cross-platform applications. Now, to make the .NET open source and we can say cross-platform, so Microsoft had funded one we can say project called Mono.NET, and this project, the objective of this project was to allow to run the .NET applications on the Linux platform and to make the .NET open source of them. Now, it's sponsored by Microsoft. It's not the product of Microsoft. So Mono is an open source implementation of Microsoft .NET Framework as a part of .NET Foundation. So to make the .NET open source and cross-platform, so Microsoft had created an organization called .NET Foundation, and this .NET Foundation has created one framework called Mono.NET. Mono.NET is not the part of .NET Framework now, but it was initially the part of .NET Framework, but now we do not have Mono.NET. So the objective of the Mono.NET to we can say migrate your .NET to Linux or other platforms and make the .NET open source of that. Now it's the result of the .NET Foundation, and it's based on the ECM standard, European Computer Manufacturer Association standard for C# and Common Language Runtime of that. Now, .NET Core is free cross-platform open source application development platform for building many kinds of applications. So .NET Core is free. So next we can say framework that we have is .NET Core. So what is the learning Microsoft learned in the implementation of the Mono.NET? So Microsoft team had done many researches, and then they came with the next framework, and we call it as in .NET Core. Now, .NET Core is a free cross-platform open source application development framework, we can say, for building many kind of applications. So it is basically used to build many kind of applications. Now, .NET Core is built on a high-performance runtime that is used in production by many high-scale apps. Few features are general purpose framework, cross-platform, open source, and it also supports CLI, a high performance. So many things are there. So .NET Core is the first thing. It's a cross-platform, so it works on Windows, Linux, and Mac, three operating system. It's free for educational purposes and individuals, but for companies, we need to buy the license. Now, open source, its source code is available publicly, so you can download it and you can modify it. Now, .NET Core is built on high-performance runtime that is used in the production for many high-scale applications. I had already shown you the performance comparing with Node.js and Golang. Now, general purpose framework, sorry, general purpose. So this can be used to develop the desktop application, web application, cloud services or cloud applications. We can say we can say IoT applications, microservices applications, gaming. Now, cross-platform, it works on the Windows and Linux and Mac operating system. Open source, its source code is available publicly. It supports CLI, so command line interface, we can say, and it has high performance. So it has high performance. Now, the next thing that we have is Xamarin.NET. So Xamarin is a free open source mobile app platform for building native and high performance iOS and Android or tvOS or watchOS using C#. So .NET Framework and .NET Core are general purpose frameworks. Those are the general purpose frameworks. Xamarin.NET is a special purpose. This is specially designed for mobile apps. Now, mobile apps are small device apps like your Android phone or iOS or iPhone or tvOS or watchOS using C#. Now, here we can use the C# to develop the Android applications or iOS application or tvOS or watchOS application. Now, Xamarin is an open source platform for building modern and performant applications for iOS, Android, and Windows with .NET. So Xamarin is an open source platform for building modern and performant applications for this particular platform using C#. The Xamarin runs in a managed environment that provides the conveniences such as the memory allocation, garbage collection, and many more features of that. So many more features of that. So, in broader way, you can say Xamarin is specially designed for mobiles and the we can say small device applications like your watchOS or tvOS. Now, especially designed for it, and using C#, we can write the code here and we can build the performant applications for iOS and Android, and it consume the .NET runtime. So it consumes the .NET runtime, and it will utilize all the features of .NET runtime, including the memory allocation, garbage collection, and many other things of that. Fine. Now, the next thing that we have is So we'll focus on the .NET Core. So out of this framework, so right now we'll focus on the .NET Core of that. Now, what is .NET Core? So just before I told you, so .NET Core is an open source general purpose development platform. So you can create a .NET Core app for Windows, Mac OS, Linux for x64, x86, ARM32, ARM64 processors using multiple programming languages. So it's a multiple programming language platform. Now, it supports any type of processor architecture. It's a cross-platform. It works on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux operating system. It's open source. It's general purpose. Now, .NET Core and the APIs are provided for cloud, IoT, client UI, and machine learning. So .NET Core has some additional things than the .NET Framework. In a .NET Framework, we are not having option to consume and build cloud services, but here we can develop the cloud services. You can host the .NET Core applications in containers. You can utilize other app services, or we can serve SQL, other Cosmos DB. So many other services we can utilize here. Now IoT, so Internet of Things of that. So client UI, that is your desktop WinForm, and WPF is available here, and it also has APIs using which we can build the machine learning apps of that. So it also helps to implement the ML applications. The project is primarily developed by the Microsoft and released under the MIT or Apache license. Now, .NET Core is developed by the Microsoft team and Microsoft initially, and to make it open source, it is released under the MIT and Apache license of that. So it's released under the MIT and the Apache license of that. Now, why .NET Core? So why we should go for the .NET Core? So if you look at to the .NET Core, it's cross-platform, open source, modern. So .NET Core is cross-platform, runs on the Windows, Mac OS, and Linux operating system. That's open source. The .NET Core framework is open source using MIT and Apache to license. .NET Core is a .NET Foundation project to that. Now, modern SaaS today's modern needs, including being mobile friendly, build once, run it everywhere, scalable, high performance, target all kind of devices, including the IoTs and gaming consoles of them. Now, so it's modern. It supports everything from asynchronous programming to parallel programming to, we can say, it's mobile friendly. Now, build anything and run anywhere, scalable. So it targets all kind of devices, including IoTs and gaming consoles. Now, so cross-platform, open source, and modern. Now, performance deliver high performance due to its architecture and utilize hardware efficiently with that, and its performance is consistent. So it deliver very high performance. Just before I told you. Now, its performance is consistent across the environment. Runs your code with same behavior on multiple operating system and architectures. For example, x64, x86 are ARM with that. Now, CLI, so easy to use. Command line tools can be used for local development and continuous integration. So it also provides you the command line tool that was not there with a .NET framework. So .NET framework was having these two problems. First is .NET framework performance depend on the operating system architecture or process architecture. It fluctuates when you change the architecture of the operating system and the processor. But in case of a .NET Core, you get the consistent performance, whatever maybe your operating system architecture or process architecture. The second thing, .NET Framework is not having a CLI, command line, we can say tools of that. So if you do, here in .NET Core, we have the CLI. Easy to use command line tools can be used for local development and continuous integration of that. Now, flexible deployment, you can include .NET Core in your app or install it side by side, user-wide or system-wide installations of that. So compatibility is a compatible with .NET Framework and Mono APIs by using .NET Standard specification there. Now, flexible deployment. So this was not a feature of the .NET Framework. In .NET Framework, we cannot run multiple versions of a .NET Framework simultaneously. If you have 2.0 framework installed on your computer, and if you install 3.5, it will upgrade the 2.0 to 3.5. So it will upgrade the .NET framework version. If you install the 4.0, it will upgrade it to the 4.0. Now, in case of .NET Core, we have the flexible deployment. You can include .NET Core inside your app directly, so that every app will have its own version of the .NET, and it will utilize that version locally for the execution of that. So, and another option that we have, install it side by side. So user-wide or system-wide installations are available. So you can install it side by side, user-wide or system-wide installations are available. Now, compatible with the .NET Framework and Mono APIs by using .NET Standard specification. So, what happened with this with the Microsoft is Microsoft had created many frameworks. So, all these frameworks. So, if you look at here, so what happened? Let me check. I have image or not. Okay, no image here. Now, so what happened actually? So, this is your .NET runtime. On .NET Runtime, we have the libraries, APIs, tools, common things with that. And on the top of this, the first framework was .NET Framework. Second framework that we got the Mono .NET. Then we got the .NET Framework. Then we have the Xamarin .NET. So the four .NETs were on a bit on top of this. But initially, so what was the problem? So initially, we are not able to consume the .NET Framework APIs in the Mono or Mono APIs in the .NET Core or Xamarin, .NET Core APIs in the Xamarin or .NET Core APIs or libraries in Mono .NET or Mono in .NET Framework. So what Microsoft did now? So after this, what Microsoft did is Microsoft introduced one layer, one abstraction here, and that abstraction nowadays is called .NET Standard. So Microsoft ने एक layer डाल दी यहाँ पर abstraction introduce कर दिया उसको basically बोलते हैं .NET Standard. And due to .NET Standard, so we are able to consume all these APIs in each order. So due to .NET Standard, so we are able to consume all these APIs with each other. So due to .NET Standard, so we are able to use .NET Framework APIs in Mono .NET, Mono APIs in .NET Core, .NET APIs in Xamarin .NET. So we are able to use those APIs. And that's why if you go to the .NET website now, so you'll not find this framework separately. So if you go to the .NET website, so you'll not find this framework separately. So you'll find only one .NET. So you'll find only one .NET here. So .NET 10. And if I go to, we can say other versions here. So you'll find the .NET 10. Then if you go down, so you'll, sorry, it's the .NET 10 versions. Now I'll go for all .NET versions. Then you will find only .NET word here. So .NET 8.0, .NET 9.0, .NET 10.0, .NET 5.0, .NET 6.0, .NET 7.0. So up to .NET Core 3.0. So this issue was that. So we were not able to use the .NET Framework APIs in a .NET Core or .NET Core APIs in the Mono .NET or Mono APIs in a .NET Core. So after this, Microsoft had introduced the .NET Standard, and the .NET Standard, due to the introduction of .NET Standard, all these frameworks got merged together. We can utilize them together, and that's why later on the naming. If you look at the naming here, so you'll find the so .NET 5.0, .NET 6.0, .NET 7.0, .NET 8.0 like this. You'll not find the .NET Framework or .NET Core or Xamarin .NET, or we can separately use that. So you'll just find one .NET. So .NET 10 is the latest version of the .NET to that. Now, so flexible deployment, compatibility with the .NET framework and Mono API using .NET standard specification, modular architecture. So .NET Core supports modular architecture approach using NuGet packages of that. Now, NuGet is a repository for .NET platform. We can install the .NET packages of that. And NuGet has many packages of that. So if I go to nuget.org, you'll find many packages that you can download and install as per your requirements. So we have 4,94,120 82 unique packages, and more than 10 lakhs we can say duplicate packages. Sorry, more than 1 crore we can say duplicate packages are there. So it's modular, so it had divided the functionality in small modules. So we call them in packages, and you can install those packages as per your requirement, and you can utilize them. So modular architecture that we have in .NET Core. Now, if you look at to the versions, initially you'll find so .NET Core 2.0, then 2.1, then 2.2, 3.0, 3.1, 5.0, 6.0, 7, 8, 9, and the current version that we have is 10 of them. Now it evolved from, we can say, 17 to 16, both of them. 16 say, we can say currently is evolving again. Now, Microsoft had changed the licensing due to this particular version. So Microsoft had introduced two types of license. One is called standard term support, another is called long-term support. So STS and LTS version. So Microsoft started releasing these two types of versions. So this versioning was not there previously. It had applied with the .NET Core only. Now STS is standard term. We can say support. These versions will be supported for a specific duration. After that, its support will not be available there. And LTS version will be support longer duration, and more duration will be available for LTS, the long-term support we can say. And it's recommended to use the LTS for the production ready apps of that. So for development, you can use any app, but for production, so it's recommended to use the LTS. So for example, if you look at here, so .NET 10.0 has LTS support, long-term support, and .NET 9.0 has standard term support to that, and .NET 8.0 has long-term support. Fine. Now, so if you look at here, history, okay, so language and editors in .NET Core. So .NET Core supports only C Sharp, Visual Basic, and F Sharp, three languages. So .NET Core support only these three languages: C Sharp, Visual Basic, and F Sharp language can be used to write applications and libraries for .NET Core. Now these languages can be used in your favorite text editor or integrated development environment (IDE), including the Visual Studio Code, Sublime, TextBeam, etc. Now, you can use any of this language, C Sharp, Visual Basic, F Sharp, as per your requirement. And since .NET has a CLI, command line interface, so due to which you can use any editor to, we can say, create, build, debug, run, deploy .NET Core applications. So you can use the Visual Studio, that's the most popular IDE for the .NET. Visual Studio Code, so you can also use the Visual Studio Code IDE editor for .NET applications. You can use Sublime, we can use the Veeam, you can use any other editor that you want to be used, because CLI is out of there. Now what we can do, so .NET Core exposes frameworks for building many kind of applications, cloud apps with ASP.NET Core, mobile apps with Xamarin, IoT apps with system.device.gpu, Windows client apps with WPF and Windows Forms. So machine learning apps using ML.NET of that. Now, cloud apps with ASP.NET Core, so you can develop the cloud applications using ASP.NET Core. You can develop the mobile applications using Xamarin.NET. You can develop the IoT applications using system.device.gpu. Now, Windows client app or using WPF and WinForm, so both are available here. And you can develop the machine learning applications using ML.NET with that. Now, .NET CLI, .NET support the CLI. So .NET has a command line interface. Now I'm going to use the word .NET. .NET means .NET Core. It's merged together, but we'll use the latest features, so we call it .NET. So we'll use the word .NET here. So .NET command line interface CLI is in cross-platform toolchain for developing, building, running, and publishing .NET applications. So .NET provides you, we can say, a very powerful CLI, command line interface, using which you can create, build, debug, deploy, we can say, .NET applications using command prompt with that. So command prompt, because sometimes you can use any editor or any idea of your choice. Now, few commands that we have in .NET Core are new, restore, build, run, test, clean. So many, we can say, commands of that. Now, .NET CLI, the following creates a new console project in the current directory, and the same name as the current directory. So .NET new console, so it will create a new application. So all .NET CLI commands starts with the .NET. तो जितने भी .NET CLI commands से .NET से start होता है, so all .NET CLI commands starts with .NET होता है. All CLI commands start with the .NET. So, and then we can have the new, we can have the build, we can have the restore, we can have the run. So whatever command that you want to run. So when we say new, then we can specify the type of app that you want to create. And if you want to create it in a separate folder, so we can use the -n and the name of app. So it will create a separate folder for this particular app. If you do not want to create a separate folder, so you don't need to put dash in here. So you don't need to put the dash in here. Fine. Now, so you do not need to install .NET Core if you install Visual Studio 22, it by default comes with Visual Studio 22, so it will get you the .NET Core SDK by default with it. So if you do not want to use the Visual Studio as your, we can say, editor, so what you can do, you can go to the Microsoft website and you can click on any of this version, whatever the version that you put. So latest version, so 10.0, and here from you can download the SDK. So we have the two download. One is runtime, so that is required if you want to deploy your applications of that, and SDK, so that is for software development using which you can develop the software. So if you are using Windows x64, so we can use this particular, we can say Windows x64 uh, deployment option. So we'll select it and we'll say install and next finish. So it will install it. Now, once you install, then you will be able to use its CLI. So it will just install the SDK. It will not install the IDE. Or if you install the Visual Studio 22, so in the workload of the Visual Studio 22 during the installation process, it will ask you what to install. So you can install the .NET Core, we can say core by default with that. Now, so I had already have the Visual Studio installed here. So now to create a .NET Core application, so what I do, so I will first create a folder. So where we want to create the .NET applications here. So it's a class demos and we'll say it's a .NET Core weekend. And here we'll say CMD. I'll open the command prompt here. Now I'll create one new application. So .NET, then we'll say new, and so I want to create a console application. So I'll specify the console. If I want to create a web application, I'll specify the web. If you want to create a web application with MVC, we'll say MVC. If you want to create a WinForm application, we can specify the WinForm. If you want to create a WPF application, we can say WPF here. So whatever type of application that you can put here. Fine. Now I want to create a console application for this demo. So I'll say .NET new console. And I want to create a separate folder for this and we'll say something called addition. Fine. So we'll create one addition console application. Now it will create the console application. You need to be, we can say, get this particular message. So restore succeeded and it had created. Now if I put a dir here, so you'll find the addition folder. So it's a cd addition. Now I'll go to the addition folder and if you say dir here, you'll find the program.cs file and cs pros file, obj file. Now if I open this particular project here, so say if I want to use the Visual Studio Code, so you can install the Visual Studio Code editor from, we can say Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is again a Microsoft editor, small editor, very powerful editor, and we'll say we used to do code with searcher. So we used to do code editor here. You can select that we used to do code editor, and then we can say you can download it and you can install it. So you can download it and you can install it here. So you can download and install it. So I had already installed it. Now it's next finish type of thing. And I will open this particular project into Visual Studio Code. So how I can open that? I'll say code space dot. So I'll put the code space dot command here. So it will open this particular project in a Visual Studio Code here. So it will open this in a Visual Studio Code. Now, if you look at here, you'll find something very interesting here. So you'll find the, we can say program.cs file. But if you click on the program.cs file, okay. So it's announcing that now you are not able to, your .NET 6 and .NET 7 SDK is no longer supported with that. Okay. So if you go to the program.cs file here, so it has the CS pros file, solution file, program.cs file. It's very interesting that you will not find any top level statements. So top level statements are optional from .NET 6.0. So .NET 6.0 onward, so we have many changes. For .NET 6.0, we have many changes. So that's the first change is no need of top level statement. It also has minimal API, auto reloading, many features. So one of the feature is you do not need a top level statement. So you do not need a top level statement. Matlab you do not need internal, sorry, namespace, then internal program class, then main method, and all those things. You can start writing the code directly. It will automatically assume that that code is already written with that. Now, for example, here, suppose you can create a three variables into A, B, C, and if I say console.write here and with something for enter number, and here we'll say a equal to, so convert that to in 32, and here's something called console dot read line, and here again we'll say console dot write, and here we'll say enter number, and we'll say b equal to, so convert that to in 32, and we'll say console dot read line. Also c equal to a plus b. Then we'll say console dot write line, and we'll say addition means now I'll go back to the we can say console prompt here. In the console prompt, I'll just say something called the .NET build. If you use any package, so we can say restore to restore the packages of that. But right now we haven't used any package, so I'll say just .NET build. We'll build your .NET core application here. I will check for any error. So build succeeded with that. Now we can say .NET run. So we can run it using .NET run here. Now once we run this, so it will execute this application. So we'll enter number, we'll enter another number. We'll give you the addition. So you can use the CLI commands to create the application from the command prompt with that. Now you can create use the command new, restore, build, run, test, clean. So many commands there. We'll use them as we required. Fine. Now the next thing that we'll do is so this little introduction about the .NET Core. Now I'll go for the ACE.NET Core. So through this particular training, so we'll focus on the ACE.NET Core here. So what is ACE.NET Core? So ACE.NET Core. So we'll see what is and why ACE.NET Core. So ACE.NET development models. So comparison with the ACE.NET MVC, create ACE.NET Core applications using CLI and Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio that. Now, what is ACE.NET Core? So ACE.NET Core is a cross-platform, high-performance open source framework for building modern web applications here. So ASP.NET Core is basically cross-platform, high-performance, open source framework for building modern web applications. So ASP.NET Core was first released in 2016 and is a redesign of earlier Windows-only version of ASP.NET. ASP.NET Core was first released in 2016 and is a redesign of earlier Windows-only version of ASP.NET designed to be lightweight, modular, and high performance of that. Designed to be lightweight, modular, and the high performance of that. Fine. Now, so it's very fast as compared to your ASP.NET, and it's modular, and it works on the Linux, Windows, and Mac, and it's open source, fully open source. And using this, you can develop the modern web applications and high performance web applications with them. Now, unified story for building web UI and web APIs. In ASP.NET Core, we have the unified story. Now, if you know the ASP.NET MVC has two options. So, ASP.NET MVC, if you want to build the UI, so web UI, so you need to use the controller class, and if you want to build the API, so you need to use the API controller class. Now in ACE.NET Core, so what Microsoft did, so in ACE.NET Core, so what Microsoft did, so Microsoft merged the UI plus API together, and it has only one controller, and that one controller will work for the API as well as we can say web UI. So you can use single controller for both. So it had merged together, and that's why we call it an unified story for building web UI or web API. Whether you want to develop the web UI or web API doesn't matter. So you can use same controller. Now, designed its architecture is designed for testability, so you can do the test automation there, or you can also implement test, or we can say driven applications, or we can say TDD application. Now, so ability to develop and run on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux that comes from the .NET Core because it's built on the .NET Core runtime. So it's built on the .NET Core runtime. So .NET Core is cross-platform. So each .NET Core is also platform, cross-platform. That's open source and community focused. So that is again from .NET Core. .NET Core also has, we can say, a good community, not huge like React or Python, but very good community with them. A cloud-ready environment-based configuration system. So this is again a feature of ASP.NET Core. So ASP.NET Core has options using which we can create a cloud-ready configurations. So we can create configurations in the form of JSONs, and those configurations will be compatible with, we can say, Azure as well as AWS. Now, environment-based configuration. So you can create the configuration based on the environment, like production development, or we can say so production development as well as we can say testing UAT. So as per the environment, also you can create the configuration, and that configuration will be utilized in that particular environment, and application will run. Now, ASP.NET Core has built-in dependency injection. So every feature Nita. So ASP.NET was closed source. ASP.NET was not community focused. ASP.NET was not having environment-based configurations. So all the configurations in ASP.NET were in the form of XML. So here we have maximum configurations in JSON, few are in XML. Now ASP.NET was not having built-in dependency injections. So if you want to use the dependency injections in ASP.NET, so what you need to do, so you need to install it, configure it, and use it. You need to use the structure map, or you need to use, you can say, Unity DI. So you need to install it, configure it, and use it with that. Now, here we have the built-in dependency injection. So ASP.NET Core is designed from scratch to support the dependency injections of that. Now, lightweight, high performance, modular HTTP request pipeline. So it's very lightweight. ASP.NET Core is very lightweight as compared to ASP.NET. Now, high performance, I had already shown you the performance. Now, modular HTTP request pipeline. So ASP.NET Core provides you a possibility to configure the HTTP request pipeline. So what should be there inside that particular request pipeline, so that every request and response goes through that particular modules. So it's very modular. So this feature was also not was there not in ASP.NET. If you want to use that, you need to use the Ovin and Katana framework of them. But it was not built in ASP.NET. So in ASP.NET Core, this feature is built in. It's fully modular, and it will help you to configure entire HTTP request pipeline as per the requirement of your application. So now, so why ASP.NET Core? So ability to host on falling. So this is again was the problem with the ASP.NET. The ASP.NET works only in IIS. So if you want to deploy the ASP.NET applications, whether it is ASP.NET Web Form or ASP.NET Embassy or ASP.NET Web API, so you need to deploy it in only one server called IIS, Internet Information Services, or server there. Now, ASP.NET Core hosts on many, we can say, web servers. So it supports many web server. It supports Castle. So Castle is a cross-platform, lightweight, small web server by the Microsoft. So you can use the Castle to host and run the ASP.NET Core application if you have very lightweight ASP.NET Core application that. Now here, so you can also host the ASP.NET Core in IIS. So you can host it in the Internet Information Services. Now you can host the ASP.NET Core HTTP.sys web server. You can host it in Nginx. You can also host it in Docker. You can host it in Apache. So Apache is also available here, and it is also self-hosted. So you can host it in console application, and you can run it from it. So it has many hosting options as compared to ASP.NET to them. Now side-by-side versioning. Now this feature is available here from. So this feature is available here from. So this feature is available here from. So side-by-side versioning, this feature is available here from .NET Core. So this feature is available from the .NET Core of that. So this feature is available from the .NET Core. Now, so you can install the, you can utilize any version of a .NET runtime as per the requirement of the application. So you can have three ASP.NET Core application running on the same computer with different .NET Core runtime with that. Or you can also install the .NET Core side by side, so that a specific version of a .NET Core will be utilized by the specific ASP.NET Core application. Fine. Now, here the next thing that we have is integration of modern client-side frameworks and development workflows. So we can integrate the ASP.NET Core with, we can say, Azure services. Now, you can also integrate this with client-side frameworks like Angular or React, or we can say Vue, Next, and it also support the continuous integration and deployment workflows like DevOps, so you can use Azure DevOps for that. Now it's fully compatible with Azure DevOps, or you can use the GitHub Actions. So it supports continuous integration and deployment features. So now, when we say ASP.NET Core, so ASP.NET Core, if you decide to go with ASP.NET Core to develop your application, so web application, so we have a few choices here. The ASP.NET Core has choices like MVC, so you can go with ASP.NET Core MVC. So in this training, we are going to focus on ASP.NET Core MVC with that. Now, the next thing that we have the Blazor, so you can also use the Blazor, you can also use the Razor Pages are three, we can say, different web development models provided by the Microsoft to create the web applications here. The ASP.NET Core MVC is the first, we can say, model that we can use ASP.NET Core. Then we can also use ASP.NET Core Blazor, or we can also use the ASP.NET Core Razor Pages to develop the web applications using ASP.NET Core. Now, the first model that we have is MVC, second model that we have is Blazor, or we can say Razor Pages. So directly we can say these are the development paths. So we can use the MVC as a development path, or we can use the Blazor as a development path, or we can use the Razor Pages as a development path here. Now, the first path that we have is the ASP.NET Core MVC. Now let's see what we have here. So it's a modern open source and highly testable framework that follows the model view controller design pattern. So if you want to take the advantage of an MVC design pattern, so then we can use this particular part to develop the web application. So ASP.NET Core MVC. So it supports the model view controller design pattern. Now, it allows developer to build dynamic websites. So using this, you can build a dynamic website with a clean separation of concerns, making it easier to manage complex applications of that. That allows the developers to build a dynamic website with clean separation of concerns, making it easier to manage the complex applications of that. Now here we can have the data in a model, we have the UI in view and a logic inside the controller. So there is segregation of the responsibilities. Now, so it's very good for complex and large applications of that. Now, Blazor's the second path that we have with the ASP.NET Core is we can go for the Blazor. So Blazor is cutting-edge framework that enables the developers to build interactive web user interfaces using C# instead of JavaScript with that. So Blazor is a cutting-edge framework that enables the developers to build interactive web user interfaces using C# instead of the JavaScript with that. Fine. Now, so if you look at the client-side application development market, so maximum frameworks, whether it is a React or Angular, or we can say Vue or Knockout or Next.js or Vue. So what is the framework that we have? All frameworks based on JavaScript. Now, ASP.NET Core also provides you an option using which we can create the client-side application. So we can create the interactive web user interfaces using C# for that. So using C# for that. So Blazor support to the current version of the Blazor support you to develop both. So client-side as well as server-side application both. So if you go for the Blazor, so you can develop both the part of the application client side as well as server side. So you can use the browser using WebAssembly or on the server via Similar. So if you use the Blazor on the server, so it runs on the server using Signal, whereas it runs in the web browser as a client application using a WebAssembly concept of that. So इससे क्या होगा? So Blazor allows you the creation of a rich UI-based web apps with the component-based architecture, providing a productive development experience with that. So your development experience will be rich, fast, and you can create a rich web apps using Blazor. And using Blazor, you can share the server-side code with the client-side code. So you can share the code between client-side and server-side with that. Now, the third part that we have the Razor Pages. So Razor Pages is a page-based programming model that simplifies the building of the web device. Now, so Razor Pages is a page-based programming model that simplifies the building of the web UIs of that. So this is page focus model of that. So MVC, model view controller pattern. So model data, so view UI, logic controller. Now Blazor component-based architecture, you can create the components and you can run those components in a web browser using a WebAssembly and server-side application, Blazor server-side application using Signal on the server, and they can share the logic. Now, the third part that we have the Razor pages, and it is page-based programming model. So you just create the pages, and in that pages you write the code. So you create a page, and in that page you write the code there. So just like we can say a little bit similar to your web forms. If you know the web form, if you do not know web form, no problem at all. So it's just like a page-based programming. So you just create the page and write the code behind that particular page. That simplify the building of the web UIs. So काफी easy है ये. It's not a replacement for MVC. So MVC का replacement नहीं, but rather an alternative that works well for page focus scenarios. That. तो यहाँ पर आप page focus coding करना चाहते हैं, so we have 4-5 pages, dynamic pages. Now instead of creating entire architecture and using MVC होता है, so what we can do, so we can use the Razor pages. We create the pages and we write the code into those pages. Now, Razor Pages makes coding simpler and more productive by reducing the complexity and the amount of boilerplate code required compared to traditional MVC. In traditional MVC, we need to write huge boilerplate code. So, as compared to that, we can say Razor Pages will be very simple, productive, and it reduces the complexity and reduce the amount of boilerplate code there. Now, each of these models has its own use cases. Now, each of these models has its own use cases and benefits of that, and the choice depends on the specific needs of the project and the preferences of the development team. So each has its own benefit and use cases. Now, choice depends on the specific need of the application and the development team of that. So, in broader way, if you look at to this, so ASP.NET Core MVC is a great for large complex application. So, if you have large enterprise application or complex applications, so we always prefer to go with ASP.NET Core MVC of that. Now, Blazor is an ideal for single page applications. So if you want to develop the SPA application, so single page application where you have a maximum part running at client side and few things on the server side, and they communicate through, we can say, Signal. Now, in that case, we can use the Blazor. So instead of relying on the JavaScript, so in Blazor, we can use the C# for that. And Razor Pages is the perfect for straightforward scenarios where each web page corresponds to a specific route to that. So Razor Pages is perfect for straightforward scenarios where each web page corresponds to a specific route to that. Now, so if you compare the ASP.NET Core, we can say with ASP.NET MVC 5, so you'll find this. Now, in ASP.NET Core runs on IIS self-hosted, so it runs on other web servers, so other than IIS like Nginx, Apache, so it runs on HTTPS. It's self-hosted as well as you can host it in a Docker. Now, ASP.NET Core MVC 5 runs only on IIS. It runs only on the IIS. Now, all configurations for JSON, so it supports all maximum configurations in the ASP.NET Core are in the JSON. Now, environment-based configuration or some common settings that you want to share through. So, all will be in the JSON here. So, here the maximum configurations are in XML. Now, ASP.NET Core support built-in dependency injections. No external install, so need external installation in case of ASP.NET MVC 5. In case of ASP.NET MVC 5, so it needs the external installation. Unified MVC and API controller, so it has merged the API and the MVC together to have only one controller, and that controller will act as a web UI as well as API. Now, separate controller for MVC and the API. So here we have the separate controller for MVC and the API. And it has HTML and tag helpers. So here we have the HTML and the tag helpers, and here we have the HTML helpers of that. Now here we have the HTML helpers, and here we have the HTML and tag helpers. Now this is cross-platform. So ASP.NET Core is a cross-platform. ASP.NET MVC 5 works on Windows only. So this works on the Windows only, and this is a cross-platform with that. Now modular, so ASP.NET Core supports modular architecture. So entire HTTP request pipeline is modular, so you can configure it as per your requirement. Now ASP.NET MVC do not have HTTP request pipeline as available in the form of modules, so that you can inject any module and use them. Now it's rigid, so it's little bit rigid. You can make it little bit modular using Katana and ON framework of that. Now, best performance. So here we have the better performance, we can say. So ASP.NET Core is tremendous fast as compared to other, we can say, frameworks of that. Fine. Now let's create a web applications using Visual Studio Code and CLI. So first we'll create the web application, ASP.NET Core web application using CLI. So what we can do, so I'll come out from this folder. So I'll say something called .NET. So new web. So we'll say dash in, we'll say first app. So it had created this particular first app here. Now I'll go to the folder first app. Now, if you go to, we can say dir here, you'll find all these files here. So you'll find dissecting.json, appsetting.development.json, first app.cs pro, robj, program.cs properties, all these files are there. Right. Now, we'll open this in the Visual Studio Code using code space dot. Now, if you look at here, so what you will have here, so similar thing. So you'll have the program.cs. Now you might get amazed with this. So program.cs is the starting point of your AS.NET Core application. Then now, so you can go for the program.cs and we have all these things here. Now I'll explain you what these particular things are there, and we can say next session. Now here, so if you go to the program.cs, the program.cs में जाओगे यहाँ पर तो you'll find again here you will find no top level statement. So top level statement जो यहाँ पर available नहीं है. Now if you look at here, so if I go to this particular thing, if I say .NET version, we check the double dash. So it's using 9.0. We can say 301 version. So in sorry .NET 6.2 onwards, we have this particular feature, no top level statement. So this is the, we can say, starting point of your AS.NET Core application. Here we have one middleware injected in the request pipeline, which will handle the get request with a root path, and it's having an anonymous function that generates hello world as a result of that. Now to run this, we'll say .NET run. So you can directly run this. So if you do the .NET run, it will build it, it will host it, and it will run it. So it had hosted this. So it had hosted at this particular click. So HTTP localhost 50252, we can say here. Now you can open this particular URL to see the output of your application here. Now let me copy this URL and go to web browser. Okay, so it had opened here. So we got the hello world. So now what we can do, so if I change this hello world and if I say something called, so welcome to ASP.NET. Now if we run this, save this, so we'll stop it here right now and we'll say .NET run again. And if I refresh this, so you'll find the welcome to ASP.NET code. Now, what these files are and what is the meaning of all this, that we'll see. So from आगे देखेंगे. Now you can also create it using, so we can say Visual Studio. So Visual Studio, say we बना सकते हैं, तो go to Visual Studio 22. So you can also use the Visual Studio 25, the latest version of the Visual Studio. Now we'll say create new project here. Now once you click on the create new project, so what we have here, we have the AS.NET Core empty application here. So you can search for AS.NET Core. Now, when you select the AS.NET Core, so here you'll get the AS.NET Core Web App, Razor Pages, AS.NET Core Web API, AS.NET Core Web API, native, or we can say AOT, AS.NET Core Empty, AS.NET Core Web App, Model View Controller, AS.NET Core Empty. So many applications of that. Now here I'll choose AS.NET Core Empty application for this particular demo. We'll create the empty application here. Now, once we click on this, so it will ask you for the name of your, we can say project, will say, so first app of VS, so Visual Studio, we can say, we'll click on this particular button here and we'll go to D drive, and here we'll go to the class demo folder. And the class demo folder will say .NET Core Weekend, and we'll say select folder. Now we'll say next here. Now next year. So in the next screen, you can select the framework that you want to use. So you can use 2.0, 3.12. 5.0, 6.0, 7.0, 8.0, and 9.0 that. Right? Now, so you can select the 8.0 long-term support for a time being. Now we'll say configure for HTTPS. If you want to use the HTTPS, if you do not want, you can remove that. If you want to create a container file, so if you want to hold this application in a container, and if you want to auto-generate the container file, you can tick on this particular option. So enable container support. So you can enable it for the Linux or Windows. It will create the Docker file automatically, and it will maintain that, and that file will help you to deploy this AES.NET Core application in container. Fine. Right now, we don't know about the containers. We'll just keep it unselected there. Now, do not use top level statements. So if you want, you can use that particular thing. So by default, it's unable to that. So nlist and .NET Aspire or orchestration is that. So if you know the .NET Aspire and if you want to do the, if you tell the microservices application, so you can do the orchestration using the .NET Aspire for that. Now here, so we have this simple option selected here. Then we'll say create. Now, once we click on the create here, so you'll find this video thing here. This is your welcome screen. Now, if you go to the solution export, so you'll find the similar file, so Visual Studio Code method. So if you go to the program.cs file, you'll find the same thing here. So hello world, and you can run this from this particular, we can say, button. So I'll just run this here. Or you can also use the FI. We got the hello world here. Now we'll make the changes here. So we'll just say something called welcome to ASP.NET Core previous version. We'll save this and we'll say refresh this. Okay, that's not doing the hot reloading. We'll just run this. Fine. So similar thing that we have here. Now, so if you look at the project structure, let me check. So, okay. So if you look at the project structure of your ASP.NET Core empty application, you'll find this particular things at the top. You'll find the solution and project name, connected services, dependencies, properties. By default, you will not find this www root folder. So you can create it, program.cs and startup.cs. So right now, we'll not find the startup.cs here. Right? Now, so if you look at .NET version, so .NET Core. So .NET Core, we can say 3.1, we can say 5.0. They were having program.cs and startup.cs files separately. From .NET Core, or we'll say .NET 6, the program.cs file is merged with the startup.cs file, and it has the program.cs file. Fine. It has merged it. So we'll find only the program.cs file. So if you look at this particular version, you'll find only program.cs file. Now, what I'll do, so I'll create one application with the older version of the .NET so that you'll able to understand what is the difference here. So we'll create one more project with the ASP.NET Core empty application, and here we'll say, so first app 5.2. Now I'll say next year, leave the 5.0 framework instead of 6.0. Now I'll say create here. Now once you go to the create, so you'll find small difference here. So here we'll find the program.cs file and startup.cs file. So first I'll explain you and then I will tell you what is that in a 6.0 or 8.0. So this is the, we can say project structure here. So project file, the first thing that we have is project file. The CS project file includes the settings related to target.NET framework, project folders, NuGet packages, references and that. So when initially Microsoft came with the .NET Core, Microsoft had removed the .cs profile. They had created some different kind of thing with that. Later on, they realized that it's better to use the CS Pro or VB Pro project file, and they shipped from 3.1 version. They have shifted to CS Pro, and we can say VB Pro file. So this particular file contains the target.NET framework, some project folders, and a NuGet package references of that. Now, we do not need to unload the project for editing the project file as old version. The file references are not included in files. The files in the root folder are part of the project command. Now, let's first understand this. So, what is different between, we can say, I need to create one more application here. So, what I'll do, I'll close few applications. I'll close both the Visual Studio Code. So if you go to the older version of the ASP.NET, that is ASP.NET MVC. So if I say create new project here, and if I say something called ASP.NET web application, okay, here we don't have that option. So we'll say ASP.NET. Oh, okay, I don't have that. You can see installed on my laptop now. Okay, so what I'll do, I will open some older folder, okay, older project, so that we will get an idea here. Suppose I open this, I don't know, this is project 3. Okay, so if I open this particular folder, now in older version of, we can say .NET, if you want to edit and modify the project file, so what you need to do, so you need to first unload the project. So right click on this and click on the unload project here. And then you can right click on this and we'll say edit project file. And then you can modify this project file, and this will be XML file. You modify it and then save it and then reload the project with that. Fine. So first difference is this. So here we need to unload the project, modify the project file, save the changes and reload the project file here. Now there's one more thing. It contains many things. It's very complicated. It also contains the file references also, folder references and many things here. Now, if you change and save it, you need to reload the project again. But if you go to the, we can say .NET Core. So .NET Core 5.2 or 6.2 doesn't matter. So you just right click on the project and then we'll say directly edit project file. So you can edit the project file without, we can say unload and reload. So you do not need to unload and reload the, we can say project for editing the project file. And this project file is very simple, very, we can say clean. Should have the target framework here and root namespace of that. Now, if you install the NuGet packages, it will get the references of NuGet packages in the folder. So this is the first difference. You do not need to unload and reload the project for editing the project file name. Fine. Now, the next thing that we have is, so in case of, we can say older version, so your project is different and your folder is different. So project is different and your folder is different. So both are different here. So both are different things. For example, suppose if I go to, we can say older version here. If I go to the folder of this particular project, and here, if I create a text file in a folder, so demo file. Now this file will not be the part of your project automatically. So folder is different and the project is different. If you want to include the files from the folder into the project, you need to click on the show all option here. Then you need to right click on that file and then you need to include it inside the project. Now this will be the part of your project. Why this is so? Because the files are also listed in a CS profile, your project file. So what is the file that is listed in a CS file will be part of your project. If it's not listed there, it will not be the part of your project. Whether that file exists into the same folder doesn't matter, or project folder doesn't matter. So here, even if you, we can say, remove this file from this particular project. Now, here, what we'll do, so it will be get physically removed. And here we have the choice of exclude and include the, we can say, files from your application tab. Now, in case of .NET Core, this is not the case of that. In case of .NET Core, the folder and the project is same. So folder and the project is same. So whatever inside the project is inside a folder, and whatever inside the folder is inside the project of that. So if I go to the folder here, and if I create, we can say demo file here, so text file. If I go to this text and if I say demo here, the demo file will be available here. So this demo file is available here. So this demo file is available here. So this demo file is already available here. So this demo file is available here. Right. You do not need to include and exclude. So you do not need to include and exclude here. So it's by default available. If you delete from the folder, so it will be deleted from the project here. So when if I delete this demo here, so it will be deleted from. This is not the case with, we can say, project. So if I create some file in the project, the text file, okay. Now if I save this and if I go to the folder and if I remove this text file from the folder, now its reference will be available here. It's listed inside the CS file there. So you need to manually delete it from here. So you need to delete it manually. Now, in case of ASP.NET Core, your folder and the can say project file is same. Let me throw a few more windows. Okay. So file references are not included in your CS file. So root folder are the part of the project. So whatever files inside the root folder is a part of project of that. Now, second difference that we have the dependency. So CS file has package references tag to define the package references. In new ASP.NET Core, packages are referenced as dependencies and categories as per the package manager. Now, so और एक difference है यहाँ पर the whatever the we can say references here we have in the references tab. तो older project के अंदर ये सब references tab में होगा and there is no categorization available. So all will be as individual. So it will be very huge. So height is going to increase. Now, if you go to the .NET Core, so the references are called dependencies here. So references are called dependencies, and we can create the categorization. So we can create the categories, and categories will have the more references. So categories will have the more references there. So every category will have the more references here. So it will have the categories. And it also have a more concept called meta package. So each button core also have a concept of meta package, and it maintains a list of package those can reference with a single entry. So meta package is nothing but a package which contains a list of packages. So group of package we can say it's a logical group of packages. Now why we need a meta package? So it makes the installation and installation easy. So if you group X packages together into one meta package, if you install the meta package, it will install all the packages. If you remove the meta package, it will remove all the packages into that, and it will also help to club or group the packages there. So you can install dependencies using NuGet package manager. So package manager is same here. Now, if you look at here, so it has analyzer category, frameworks category. If you go to framework category, you'll find a package called Microsoft ES.NET Core app. But this is not a package. This is a meta package because it contains other packages. it has a list of other packages. So this is the meta package of that. So this is the difference that we have between older and newer version. Now, properties section. So properties node include the launchSetting.json file, which include the Visual Studio profiles for debug settings of that. Right. Now, if you look at to the previous version, so if you go to the properties node, you'll find the assembly information into the properties node. So you'll find the similar information, but in case of we can say .NET Core. So in the properties node, you'll find launchSetting.json, and this launchSetting.json contains the we can say profile information. So you can create the multiple profiles, and as per that profile, you can configure the things of that. So what is this profile now? How to configure and create the things that we'll see in further sections. So launchSetting.json file contains the profiles, and this profiles will have the settings. So that those settings can be used as per the profile. So as per the profile. Fine. Now, the next thing that we have is something called properties section. So launchSetting.json. LaunchSetting.json contains the configuration setting for debug profile in the development, which can contain multiple profiles and environment variables. And as per, we can write the conditional code. So as per that, we can write the conditional code that we'll see. Now, www root folder. So by default, will do not have a root folder here. You can create www root folder. So right click here, we can create a www root folder. This is built-in folder in ASP.NET. So its icon is going to change, and it's a built-in folder. So what is the purpose of this folder? So by default, www root folder in ASP.NET Core project is treated as a web root folder. So it's a web root folder. So what it means, all the static files. So all static files means your image files or CSS files or JS files can be stored in any folder under the web root and accessed with a relative path to that root. So ASP.NET Core has segregated the thing. So all the static files should be in www root folder. So if you do not create a static file in www root folder, so ASP.NET Core will not serve that particular file. So ASP.NET Core will not serve that particular file to the browser. So if you have the static files like JavaScript files or CSS files or image files, so what you can do, so you can put those files in a we can say www root folder or the subfolder under the www root folder. So you can create the multiple subfolders under the www root folder, and there you can put the package files with that. So you can create the separate folders for the different types of static files, such as the JavaScript, CSS, images, library script, etc. Of that. And now, so main method. So next thing that we have main method here. So initially, ASP.NET Core application start as a console application. Now, older version में www root का concept नहीं, you can create any folder and you can store anything. Now here, if you look at to the ASP.NET Core application, so initially ASP.NET Core application start as a console application. So when you run the ASP.NET Core application, so by default it will start as an we can say console application. So main method is the entry point for the application, so where we can configure, host, run ASP.NET Core application. So just like your console application or WinForm application, so ASP.NET Core application has a main method, and that main method will be the entry point of your ASP.NET Core application, where we can configure your entire application. We host your application, we create the host, we load the configuration into that host, and we build that host, and then we run your application using that particular host of that. Now, this main method contains some, we can say things, create web builder. So it has a method called create web host builder, and it create web host builder method called the create default builder method of a web host, and it creates the default web host with a certain pre-configured default settings of that. Now, so this main method, if you look at to the, we can say program.cs file, this program.cs file has a main method here, and that main method calls the create host builder method, and this create host builder will load at the first step, it will call the create default builder method of a host. It will load all the configuration from different configuration files, and then it will generate a configuration. Then it will create the host. It will also register the startup file to your, we can say, application. What is startup file that we'll see? So it will register the startup file to your host using use startup extension method of a web builder, and then it will build that host. So once your host get configured, so it will build that host and it will run your application. So it will build that host and it will run your application. So this is the code by default available in the main method. So you do not need to worry about this, because the latest version of you can say .NET Core do not have this code. This code is merged. It's hidden from you. You do not need this code to be explicitly accessed. If you go to the 6.0 version of the project here, let me go here. So you'll not find any program.cs, sorry, start.cs file and program.cs file. Do not have any main method or create default host or build host. No code is available. It's hidden problem. Now, basically, whether it is a 6.2 application or 8.2 application or 9.2, 10.2, 5.2 application, when you run the Spotted core application, initially start as a console application, and there will be a main method, and that will be the entry point of your eSpotted core application, where we configure the entire application, we host that application, and we run that particular application there. Now, this is the code that we have in the main method. Now, create default builder. So the method, it will set up the web server. So what this method will do, so at the first step, it will set up your web server. It will load the host and application configuration from various configuration sources. Then it will configure the logging. It will register the start class, which contains the methods to configure the services and the config method of that. So it will start up the web server, it will load your host, it will read all the configurations and load the configurations from various configuration setting. It will register the logging, it will register the startup class with your, we can say, application. And startup class contains two methods, configure services and configure. And then it will build your host and then it will run your application with that. So configure register startup class. So it will register the startup class using use startup method. And if you look at the startup class, so startup class contains two methods. One is called configure services and another is called configure. So one is called configure services and configure. The two methods there. So startup class contains two methods. One is configure services, another is configure method. Now, startup class. So each .NET Core startup class provides the entry point for your web application, and it's required for all application. Now, each .NET Core application must include startup class. It is just like your global.asx in a traditional .NET application. So in traditional .NET application, you'll find the global.asx, which will have the events like application start, application end, session start, session end, application error. So those things you can configure here using a startup class. But startup class is a very advanced version of a global.asx. We cannot say it's global.asx so that because startup class will help you to configure entire request pipeline. So it will help you to configure entire HTTP request pipeline in ASP.NET Core web application. The ASP.NET Core application must include startup class. It is like global RSX in traditional .NET application. As the name suggests, it is executed first when the application starts. So its name itself suggests that when you run the application at the first class that will be executed start after execution of your main method. Now the start class can be configured using use startup T extension method of your web host builder. Now at the time of configuring the host in the main method of your program class of that. Now, the name startup is by convention. It's not compulsory that your class should have name startup. You can have any name, but if you have different name, you need to register that start class to your application using sorry host using use startup T extension method for web host builder. Now, the startup class must contain configure method and configure services method. So, startup class should have configure method and configure. We can say configure method and configure services method. So, what is the use of this configure services method? That will see further. Now, there's one more thing that you need to worry about ASP.NET Core is in-process and out-process hosting. ASP.NET Core support both type of hosting. So you can use the in-process hosting or out-process hosting. Both of hosting models are available here. Now, by default, when you run the application in Visual Studio, so it will use in-process hosting model. That means it will use the IS Express worker to host your application. Now, when you run the, we can say, ASP.NET Core application from Visual Studio, so it will by default use this in-process hosting model here. So it will use the in-process hosting model. So if I run this, so it will use the IS Express to host your application. And your application and a web server runs in the same process. So if you look at to, let me go to the folder version here. So here you'll find the, we can say ISN as Express, and here your application hosted. Fine. So ASP.NET could support both hosting model in process. So if you run your application by default from Visual Studio, it will use the in process hosting where your web server and the process runs in the same process of that. So application runs in the same process. When you run the application from the command prompt, it uses out of process hosting because it uses Castle web server. So Castle is again a Microsoft web server. It's a cross-platform web server. a small web server, and it uses out process hosting where your web server runs in a different process and your application runs in a different process. So Crystal cross-platform web server for ASP.NET Core, and it is default server for out process hosting model. That's fine. ना दिस द थिंग दैट आई टू टेल यू टुडे. सो आज हम इसको यही छोड़ेंगे. सो कल हम इसको वापस से क्या करेंगे, कंटिन्यू करेंगे. सो कल हम इसको वापस से कंटिन्यू करेंगे. फाइन. तो जो भी आज मैंने आपको यहाँ पर बताया उसमें कोई डाउट या क्वेरी है तो फटाफट पूछ लो.
नहीं सर.
अभी
नहीं सर, थैंक यू.
श्योर. तो मैं इसको अपलोड कर देता हूँ यूट्यूब में, थोड़ा टाइम लगेगा, एंड यू कैन एक्सेस इट.
ओके.
थैंक यू वेरी मच एंड गुड
थैंक यू
नाइट.
सर. गुड नाइट.
थैंक यू सर.